Introduce my guests to you and our topic. To my right, government spokesman Eric Kiraithe, and to my left, Edward Kisiangani, our resident political analyst. We are discussing the clamour for electoral reforms and the conduct of the government. And I will start with you, Eric. What is your own assessment of how the government handled, especially the last 2 weeks of intense politicking around this clamour for reforms?
Well, and I would want to say that by and large, the government has done reasonably well, bearing in mind the character and nature of those demonstrations. And especially the unfortunate thing that some of the demonstrators were not exactly civil. Some of them carried weapons. Some of them disregarded the rights of other Kenyans, the rights of movement. You don't have to block the road. They disregarded the rights to do business, to earn a living. And we saw that the handling was good. The police commanders were very cautious in most cases. I must admit that there have been incidences which are very, very questionable, but the relevant arms are investigating that, and that is very welcome. But by and large, I would want to say that most of the police officers, because basically here what is visible is the action of the police, and that is what people are commenting on. And I would want to tell you for a fact, a good job has been done. We would want to encourage the officers who have been firm. When the Constitution said we had rights across the board, it did not mean that when you are a demonstrator you have more right than any other person.
But you would admit that security forces to some extent did use excessive force in some of the riots?
What I would want to say is that some individuals used excessive force. That is what is apparent. When all the circumstances of those incidences are investigated, we shall be able to be told by the investigators, by the IPOA, and probably by other agencies, even the judiciary, whether given the circumstances of the matter, the force was excessive or not. What I would want to say is that, having been a policeman myself, we need a common understanding of what is policing in this country and what we expect from the police. This is a dialogue which has been going on for a very long time. For example, if you are driving along University Way and there are people shouting and throwing stones, it doesn't matter they are 10 or 100 and you are 1 or 2. What are your rights? If you have a kiosk around Anniversary Towers, around River Road, somewhere in Mombasa, somewhere in Embu, somewhere in Karachuonyo or wherever, what are your rights? If you have a house next to our IEBC office, because most of these offices are rented anyway, if that is your building, what are your rights? And more fundamentally, if you have been appointed as an individual to some office in this country, you have been appointed as an IEBC commissioner, and you went through a rigorous process, people vetted you, and you are seated in office, and it transpired that something happened the year before you joined. What are your rights? And what are your rights
as you know, a Kenyan citizen, to protest, to picket, etc.,
right
and receive police protection as you do it?
The rights to protest, not to protest, to picket, to demonstrate, and express yourself, whether other people like it or not, is not negotiated in the Constitution. It is a right. But remember, the Constitution is a continuous war. You cannot start violating one section of the Constitution and you start demanding protection from another section of the Constitution. That is the kind of confusion which will even confuse the law enforcement themselves.
Just one more question before I bring in Prof to this. Big Eddie online, you're asking, why did police use live ammunition instead of rubber bullets against protesters?
That is a very salient question. it must be answered at some point. I have heard the police spokesman talking very candidly about it. I do not want to go down to the operation and the tactical level of police work. I'm the government spokesman, and the policy is whether you use firearms, you use a baton, or you just use an order as a police officer, it must be within the law. The government is very keen on those incidences being investigated and the facts coming out and corrective action taken. And as we move on...
You've just said you're a former police officer. You were the former police spokesman.
Yes.
What is your assessment as government spokesperson?
I would want to confess that I don't have all the facts regarding that case. We have received information. Part of it, which we have confirmed so far, is that 29 police officers were injured, varying degrees of injuries. At least 9 who continued complaining after receiving initial treatment have been brought over to Nairobi, and they are being treated. At the point where a police officer gets injured, his life is in danger. And the law, without unequivocally, and it is not police in Kenya or police in some part of this country or the other, whether you are in the US, whether you are in the UK, the minute you endanger the life of a law enforcement officer, expect a lot of force to be used. I wouldn't want to make a statement of judgment today and say that the incident where the bullet was fired was justified or unjustified, but I would want to state the government position that the law on proportionality of force must be used. But before I conclude, those who are also organizing these demonstrations have a civic responsibility to themselves to evaluate their organization, to evaluate their mobilization, and also assure themselves that if they protest tomorrow, protesting is not a fight. So issues of your followers carrying stones, granite stones, you know, if I face you on tonight with a granite stone, I don't know what you'd think. But remember, these police officers are human beings, and the law becomes very easy when some party thinks they have the right to operate outside the law but expects the other party to operate within the law. The statements we have been hearing, even from some of these organizers,
you're almost saying two
are
wrongs
not
make a right.
within the law. Never, not today, not yesterday, not eternally.
Let me bring in Prof on this, because when you say that one party expects to operate outside the law and expects the other one to keep the law, obviously we expect the government to keep the law, citizenry as well. But it can't be that if citizens break the law, then, you know,
a very brief correction. I was answering that question you asked me. As a former police officer, what do I say? You know, I have been punched while effecting an arrest.
Right.
And I know the
Did you
training.
punch back?
Not all the time, but
no, some of
our level of temperance, our biological makeup is not the same. But I don't want to reduce myself to the tactical level. That's why I was telling you, let's give the investigators a chance. I think IPOA has proved itself to be a credible body, and let's hear from them.
Prof, let's hear from you.
I just wanted to get some clarification and from the government spokesman before I make my comment.
Right.
Are you, as a government spokesman, do you speak what is lawful or what the government stands for, even if it is immoral?
That is a very good question. The idea of government itself is a product of the law. And therefore, the minute, whatever the limits of the Constitution and the laws of this country bind me as a civil servant, as a state officer, and that is what gives me credibility.
The reason why I'm asking that question, you have already said you are a former policeman.
Yes.
You are just a policeman, you have not changed. Because in 2007, I remember from your discourse, the one that you're presenting here in 2007, I remember I watched a television clip where a policeman was shooting at a young man who was withdrawing in Kisumu. I remember the statements you made were to the effect that the media had manufactured, using rocket science, a film to show that the police were brutal. Of course, we know how the case ended up. There was no threat to the police, but you justified it. A few moments, a few days...
Let me deal with that.
Finish because you will respond to each one of the things I'm saying. A few days ago, I watched you on television insisting that the police can use force, and they should use force, and again, apparently justifying it. You have just done the same thing on this show, though a bit in a subtle manner. What I would like you to know is this. I think you, as a government spokesman, you must also be guided by the law, and you must advise the government you speak for to follow the law. From the beginning, when these demos were announced, the Minister for Interior declared war on the demos. In fact, the official position of government was to criminalize the demos, which was illegal under Article 37. And you know, the demos were right. What we expected the police, and you as a policeman, now working as a government spokesman, you should just have said, these guys have a petition to present to the IEBC to ask them to go. So you call them around and say, you know, not all of you can fit in the office of the commissioners. So, for security reasons, we want you to present your petition. You can address your people at Uhuru Park, but we shall allow you to enter the offices and present the petition without necessarily being chaotic. The police did not do that, but they waited for the crowds to come. This discussion about security is under what you call the Public Order Act of 1964, which is still archaic now. When you have a law that does not tally with the Constitution is what you use. So I'm surprised that you have been justifying criminal acts against citizens. And finally, what I want to say, as I ask you now to respond, if you look at the Constitution, I think you as government spokesman should go back and read the Constitution. And the way I want you to start reading, you read Article 2 of the Constitution, which says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. After you move from there, you come to Article 19, which is the beginning of the Bill of Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. Article 19.3 states clearly that these rights are not given by the state, but these rights are God-given. They are natural. They are not given to the individual by the state. Now, when you move there, you go to Article 26, which says that people have a right to life, and all of us have a right to life. And even 28 talks about human dignity, the way you handle people. And then 37 gives them a right to picket, demonstrate, and petition the authorities. These guys never broke the law. Government criminalized the demos and went ahead to kill people, to injure people. You should have sat down and discussed the modus operandi of presenting petitions to the authorities without necessarily being violent. You never engaged the opposition, but now you justify violence. This government in other democracies should have resigned purely for this.
You know, and professors are trained to teach, and you have given quite a good lecture. I would wish to congratulate you for that, but remind you are supposed to do research. You started with an incident of Kisumu riots of 2007-2008, where I said that the clip was manipulated. The question I was asked by a reporter who is still very much alive is that PC Njeru was at the scene. I don't want to go to the background because he was picking it from a statement. And I tell you, up to today, the implication of PC Njeru was a manipulation. PC Njeru was not at that scene. He did not fire. And so long as the truth, the word truth lives, go and do your research. Let's meet you after 2 weeks. You'll know that I said the truth and your version was not based on any fact.
You lied. You lied.
Fast forward. Let him
fast forward. Quickly. Well, I don't know whether Njeru was ever mentioned because people, but he was not there.
If we could return to our topic.
Let me go back to the topic of issue of something being criminal. The language which was being used and which was the minister was responding to was issues of forceful removal. If you have done your research or used your ears only, you know forceful removal. Eject the commissioners. That one is not within the constitution. Don't talk like the evangelists who read one verse in the Bible and walk around selling miracles. The issue of ejecting forceful removal is not there, and I am putting it to you. Review the process in Mombasa, where the protesters have gone and presented a petition and walked away. There has been no incident.
Let me move the conversation forward, because we're running out of time.
Were hurt and they were harassed. So I think if you are a government spokesman, that's why I asked you, Anne, when you are a government spokesman, you say lies even when it's not in order.
All right.
Because that's what a fact does not become a lie because a professor is saying so. Otherwise, you'll start making people doubt what is this professor all about.
We want to move the conversation forward to the issue of airlifting officers. I'll start with an audience question. Danos Silvanus on Twitter, you're asking, you're saying Kiraithe should explain why poor Kenyans who were injured in the demonstrations were not airlifted for medical treatment but only police officers.
I would want to inform, you call them what?
Ndaso,
that proper treatment of police officers who get injured on duty is now a government policy. A few years ago, actually, it was very unfortunate. I used to feel very bitter about it. The situation on when police officers are injured on duty, whether it's a road accident, whether it's a shootout, whether it is riots like this. Remember, those police officers you see there are not looking for any political position. They are not going for any mission of your own. It is a young man from all over Kenya whom we see queuing during recruitment who have offered to go and do that job. When they are stoned on duty, on law enforcement duties, and remember, whatever the professor thinks, everybody is innocent until proved guilty. If one of those officers who got injured, we later learn that is used excessive force, you'll be punished as a
but let me ask you as a government. Yes.
Once a police officer is treated at Homa Bay Hospital, and I am very sure neither Anne nor the professor goes to seek treatment in a district hospital. But remember, there were 29 and only 9 came over. They are entitled to the best treatment available as law enforcement officers, and I believe this is something for which the government should be congratulated.
What treatment specifically are they receiving in Nairobi that they could not get in Kisumu?
What specialized treatment would you require if you are stoned in the head? I think you require scanners, you require this, and this is where the government has facilities like Forces Memorial Hospital and all that. But the issue of an injured police officer being airlifted, for heaven's sake, I think we need to congratulate the government.
You know, under Article 10 of the Constitution, that is discrimination. That's why, you know, I was telling you, these are national values.
These are the rights of a worker. Professor,
there are citizens who are also
start quoting small bits and pieces. It is the government which sent this police.
I know you don't respect this constitution. I know you don't respect the
I have a lot of respect for it. If there is anybody abusing the constitution by misinterpreting it deliberately, hiding under the title of professor, it must be yourself.
I want to interject there. It has been seen, Prof, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
It has been seen, this particular airlifting incident, as frankly, quote unquote, a PR stunt, and the public is asking, why did it take 2 days to get them here if their injuries were that grievous and serious?
Let me tell you the story I have, because I have that one very clearly. The first day those who were injured, they were all treated and discharged. But even where they were being treated, a few were advised that, especially I know 3 cases, you must seek further because of x-rays and all that. And also others started complaining. And when a police officer is injured, you leave him in the house in the morning, and you don't even go back to see how are you faring. Then it is very, very unfair. So the information I have from the police service itself is that these people complained, and what I would encourage the Inspector General to start doing, that one must be upheld. We must provide resources. If a police officer is injured, let him get the best treatment available in this country.
Anyway, what I would like to just get back to, because he's a government spokesman, is there, have you ever considered the option of calling the opposition when they wanted to petition? Because they never ejected anybody, but of course they might have used that language. But did you ever engage them to say, you are not going to do anything unconstitutional, petition is right, and we are going to escort you to present the petition to IEBC? Did you ever explore that?
What I would want to tell you very clearly is that even today, Professor, the government, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen even His Excellency the President, is more than willing to solve every problem in a way that shows this country as a mature democracy.
But he's not willing to solve it at State House. He said that
what I would want to tell you is this. You know, we have a very short memory. One of the reasons we wrote this constitution, which you like to solve so much, is to remove the idea of a president who is a professor, Mukulima number 1, finance minister number 1, lawmaker number 1. We have a constitution which has provided structures. Unless we are now saying that when we made a constitution which also gave the president the perimeters, we erred. And then now the president should be sitting down, Eric, professor here. So let's say, what do you think about that one?
There is a misunderstanding there.
Let us not continue asking the president to operate outside the constitution.
The president cannot sack the commissioners, and that is a fact.
Even as we are talking now, the parliament is still discussing these issues. Why do we feel that the constitution is too small, that we must start looking? Lobby anybody.
Let me bring
His Excellency. Lobby anybody to give you support for your
chief executive.
But for heaven's sake, don't ask him to become chief executive outside the constitution. No, that is not the way.
No. I think, Anne,
your final comment, Prof.
How can you discuss the IEBC without involving the president? What we are saying, and some of us think that way, that the president has actually no right to sack the commissioners. But looking at the turbulent political terrain we are facing, the president can lead talks that can end up in parliament to have this problem fixed. So nobody's telling the president to act outside. As a chief executive, when there is a national crisis, he has a right to discuss and say, so how best can we sort it out so that when we go to parliament, we can speak with one voice.
It's not unconstitutional.
It's not unconstitutional. He can even call a Kamkunji at State House and just discuss how do we come out of this. He is our chief executive, and we cannot discuss this matter outside the knowledge of the chief executive. So I think as government spokesman, you are performing poorly on that. You should just, the president must
I'll ask you to just hold. I'm sure you have a comment for that, but as a final question to you, and perhaps your final answer as well, now that the opposition has suspended those demos to give the room for dialogue, etc., what do you think ought to happen during this window when there are no protests, so it's not a lost opportunity and we don't end up back at the streets with the kind of violence that we saw?
Let's open a love window. I must say that the professor is doing an excellent job of contradiction. He thinks I'm doing a poor job. Let me clarify that we have a president who is not shy to talk for himself. I don't want to pretend to talk for the president. But so long as the issue and structures of government are concerned, follow the law. And I can assure you, His Excellency the President will be with you.
Even government has to follow the law.
If there is a motion in Parliament and His Excellency deems it necessary to have a Kamukunji, you will do it. And let me tell you, let us use not any window, any day or 1 week or 2 weeks to reflect as a country. Why did we do a constitution which gives such privileges like a suspected murderer being released on bond? Let us not start reading the constitution like a bad preacher, or the way Al-Shabaab reads the Quran.
So the government will not be in this period putting a proposition on the table.
The government is evaluating a lot of things. But I can assure you there will be no proposition to be made outside the Constitution. Democracy and the rule of law are about democracy and the rule of law. They are not about indoctrination or taking a high ground and saying that this is performing well, they should do this. Let us, what is discretionary will remain discretionary. What is bound by law shall remain within the law, and that is what will make us civilized. Tomorrow, Professor, I might not like you, I might not like what you teach, you will demand your right.
Let the government follow the law.
Let the government have to go to break, gentlemen.
Dealing with the demo.
I thank you both for your views.